Thank you, Sandy. It's so much of a pleasure to be back at my home club. I've traveled the state, statewide. Running for statewide office is not for the faint of heart. But I can tell you, I saw Mike Clampett, Representative Clampett, not too long ago, and just outside of Brevard. Actually, we were in Pisgah Forest. So I had breakfast with Mike and some great patriots in Transylvania County in Pisgah Forest. I had breakfast there, and then later that night I had dinner in Brunswick County near Southport. So as the crow flies, that's about a 5.5 hour drive. That's a long way to go for dinner, let me tell you. But I was glad to have breakfast with Mike. He's a great legislator. He is the leading legislator on driving while impaired. And so when there are laws that are proposed by victim advocates to make our communities safer when it comes to driving while impaired, Mike's usually the tip of the spear on those. So I'm glad you came. I'm glad you joined tonight as well. So Mike and I served together in the House. But I'm running for the Court of Appeals, but let me talk to you a little bit about my experience in the Army National Guard. So as Sandy mentioned, I joined when I was 37 years old, and I was a first lieutenant. So I don't know how many first lieutenants you come across in your career, Curtis, but most of them are probably not 37 years old, right? And so I'm already the old guy, right? And so what they do in JAG school, when I'm a lawyer, I joined the Judge Advocate General Corps. The first week of JAG school, they let the guidon carrier be the youngest person in the class. And so I think she was like 22, right? And she was a beast. She's an amazing athlete. I think she was a track star in college. And then the second week, they let the oldest person in the JAG school class carry the guidon. And that was me, all right? And so it was a wonderful experience going through that. And we were at Fort Benning. Well, I don't even know what it's called now, but we were at Fort Benning doing the same things on the same courses that the Rangers do. Now, we weren't Rangers. I'm not saying we were JAGs, we're lawyers, right? But we were doing the same land nav, the same weapons qualification, the same everything. And let me tell you, if you want to understand attention and walking circumspectly, it's on the range with a bunch of lawyers with rifles, right? That's going to get your attention. Yes, I will listen to the tower, and I will move when the tower says to move because there's a bunch of lawyers with rifles all around me. So that's part of my experience. But tonight, you might not know that Judge Shirley, he was a judge advocate in the Army, and he ended his career as a captain in 03. I'm an 04, I'm a major. Greg Gebhardt's a lieutenant colonel, he's an 05. And then we've got Josh McConkey, he's an 06. You've got an 03 and 04, 05, and 06 speaking to you tonight. So you've got a pretty good breadth of experience when it comes to a military officer. And so I'm honored to be part of it, truthfully. I'm honored to be part of it. I don't think it belongs, but I'm glad you invited me. But as a state prosecutor, my polar star is, did that criminal defendant commit the offense on the date as alleged by local law enforcement? And generally, my cases are generated by local law enforcement. That is the essence of law and order. As a prosecutor, I consider my job to represent both sides of the V, so to speak, right? There's a criminal defense attorney on the other side, and their sole job is to represent the criminal defendant. Whereas my job is to represent justice. And if a person was improperly charged or their constitutional rights were violated, I view it as my role as a state prosecutor to fix that. And as a partner with local law enforcement, right? Well, that's the same role that judges play. The polar star for judges and prosecutors is law and order. What's the opposite of law and order? Lawlessness and disorder. A lot of people say chaos, right? Lawlessness and disorder. Now, I'm going to ask you to think, as you read the headlines over the past month or so, have you seen lawlessness and disorder on display in our country? Have you seen people trying to take down this flag on our college campuses and replace it with a flag from another country? Have you seen that? Does that represent law and order? Is that why we celebrate Memorial Day, to allow that lawlessness and disorder to be on display in our country? Absolutely not. And that's why I was willing to have breakfast in Piscataway and drive 5.5 hours across our state to have dinner in Brunswick County, is because the rule of law and order, our Constitution is that important. And we need folks on the bench taking care of our communities when it comes to public safety and law and order. The Court of Appeals is the court of last resort for 90% of the cases in our state. 50% of the cases that go to the Court of Appeals are criminal appeals, meaning there was a criminal conviction, and that conviction, tried by a jury, found a person guilty, and then that guilty verdict is appealed to the Court of Appeals. Half the cases that go to the Court of Appeals are criminal appeals. I would be one of 4 prosecutors out of 15 judges on the North Carolina Court of Appeals. I believe it's an important mindset to bring to the Court of Appeals that I've actually tried a case that resulted in a jury verdict where a jury took someone's freedom away for violating the laws of the state of North Carolina. We at the Court of Appeals are the court of last resort to protect public safety when it comes to criminal convictions. That's a big part of why I'm running for the North Carolina Court of Appeals. And I can tell you, when you look at the candidates that are running for statewide judicial office this cycle, the amount of experience that we bring to the table pales in comparison to the other side's candidates. There's one fellow running on the Democrat side who's been licensed to practice law for 5 years, and he's running to be a judge on the North Carolina Court of Appeals. That shocks the conscience. You should be surprised that would even be a possibility, right? And so the stakes are high. Currently, it's an 11-4 court on the Court of Appeals. If we lose all 3 seats this year, we're back to a 50-50 Court of Appeals. We've got 1 Supreme Court seat, currently a 5-2 majority. If we lose in 24 or 26, there's another seat up in 2026 on the Supreme Court, but there are 3 seats up in 2028. If we lose in 24 or 26, we could lose the majority on the North Carolina Supreme Court by 2028. We can't take a year off, right? We can't take a cycle off when it comes to judicial elections. They're too important. Additionally, your neighbors don't know anything about judicial candidates. This club has an outsized influence in this county, the most important county in the state, on making sure that the Constitution is defended and law and order is preserved. When we've got slate cards, we're going to print off 1 million of these. Now, if I print off 1 million of a piece of collateral, my expectation is it gets in the hands of voters, and that's what this club does better than anybody else. You are the tip of the spear to help Chief Justice Newby maintain his 401 vote lead after almost 6 million votes cast, right? You are the tip of the spear to make sure that election was preserved and the result was correct. So thank you for your work. My name is Tom Murry. I'm running for the Court of Appeals. You can find more about me on jointom.com, and I'm sure we'll have time for questions from any of us, and I look forward to hearing from Josh McCombs next.